Good evening. It's July 1st. We are continuing our tefillah series. I guess most of you are going to catch it on the recording this time. Okay, last time we did we were towards the end of the first bracha of Shemoneh Esreh. We did the words Melech, Ozer, Umoshia, Umogain. King who is helping and saving and defending or shielding. That is what we did last time, right?
Right.
Now we'll move on. Okay, so here is the closing of the first bracha, and it closes similar to the way it begins with the words Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, which we explained in class number 3, which is on video. What it means, how we asked the question in class number 3, how do you bless Hashem? A blessing means an increase, and it's impossible to increase Hashem, who is infinite. You remember the answer? It's okay if you don't, because it was a long time ago. We said what it means essentially is increasing, so to speak, the revelation of Hashem in the world. I'm saying in a very short form because we spent probably like 40 minutes on this. So I'm saying in very, very short form that Hashem's purpose in creating the world was for our benefit, was to create a perfect world where we experience only pleasure, and the world as it's created is lacking in its perfection, and it's our purpose to partner with Hashem to bring it to that perfection. And so this name of Hashem, the Yud name of Hashem, which represents sort of Hashem's infinity, we are asking that infinity of Hashem be increased in the world, so the world is uplifted to the perfection that Hashem has purposed for it. So that's Baruch Atah Hashem. Hashem, your infinity should increase in the world in the form of a revelation. I mean, obviously Hashem's infinity is not limited in any way except our experience. Our experience of Hashem's infinity is limited by what's revealed to us, and we want to reveal more, and that's really the job of the Jew, and that is what we are requesting with Baruch Atah Hashem. Increase that revelation of your infinity, of that goodness, of that benefit. Baruch Atah Hashem. And then, okay, when we say the words Baruch Atah Hashem, just like in the beginning, the halacha is that a person bends their knees when they say the word Baruch, then they bend at the waist when they say the word Atah, and they straighten up when they say the name of Hashem, Adonai. There's only 4 places in Shemoneh Esreh where we bow. You know that? So you're not allowed to bow at the beginning and the end of every bracha. It's actually not permitted to do so. Only in the appointed places. 2 of them are in this bracha. The first Baruch Atah Hashem is the first bow, and now this final Baruch Atah Hashem is the second bow. Where's the third place we bow in Shemoneh Esreh?
At Thanksgiving.
At Thanksgiving, when we say the word Modim. But there we don't bend the knees, we just bend the waist. Modim, anachnu lach sha'atahu. And again, we lift up when we say the name of Hashem. And we'll get to that later. Who knows? A few years from now, we'll get to that bracha. And at the end of Thanksgiving, with Baruch Atah Hashem, again, we'll be bending the knees, bending at the waist, and straightening up. Technically, you might say that there's another place that we bow, which is
At the end.
At the end, when we take 3 steps back. I want to save that for later because it's a big discussion. If we ever get there. Because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in how Shemoneh Esreh is meant to be concluded. So I could talk about it now, but we'd be going off topic. So at the end, there's a special way that we bow, but that's sort of already the end. It's already considered like a postscript to Shemoneh Esreh. It's not part of the blessings. So here in the first blessing, we bow at the beginning, we bow at the end. Baruch Ata Hashem, and we end with the words Magen Avraham, which means
Shield.
Yes,
Of Abraham.
shield of Avraham. Okay. Yeah, you have a thought? Okay.
Yeah.
Why do we end with shield of Avraham? What do I mean by this question? In this bracha, we mentioned Avraham, we mentioned Yitzchak, we mentioned Yaakov, we mentioned all three of the forefathers.
Well, Abraham's kindness or chesed, right?
Yes,
Are we wanting to be shielded with kindness?
it's a great thought. So also, we have the word Magen, shield, which we had, that was sort of the last word in the bracha before Baruch. We had the Magen, shielding. We also had Ozer, helping, Moshiach, saving. Why is Magen, so to speak, the chosen closure of this bracha that we say? Okay, blessed are you, Hashem, you are the shield of Abraham. Number one, shield, and number two, Abraham. Why these two? So you want to say because Avraham is chesed, is kindness, and therefore we want to emphasize God's kindness. And Magen, shield, we want to be shielded with kindness. Why shielded with kindness? Why not have kindness pour over us, or be increased with kindness, or why shield? So go
No,
ahead.
I was thinking of the harsher parts of Hashem and shielded from his din, or I don't know.
Okay. So we're going to see more about din in the next bracha, but it's interesting because we ended off last time explaining that Magen, this was my explanation, that Magen was basically, like we said, Ozer, Hashem helps us when we have the ability to help ourselves. Moshiach, Hashem saves us when we don't have the ability to do anything ourselves. And Magen is that Hashem preserves us even if we're not helped and we're not saved, but we're still preserved. And the point of preservation is, we said, preservation until the promised redemption. So it's a promise of we will get there. That was kind of, I want to give a shout out to my friend Jeff Al-Hadaf, who said on this past week's parsha that we read Shalach, which was the section dealing with the spies. And that the spies give their evil report and God decrees, okay, if that's how you feel about the land, then you're not going in. Right? And Hashem decrees that the Jews will wander the desert and the next generation will go in. And, the people, they kind of like have remorse and they try to go in anyway. And Moshe says, no, Hashem's not with you. And they go and they're unsuccessful in going in. And so it's like this very, very sad ending. But immediately what happens right after is Hashem starts giving them the commandments of the portions that they'll separate from their produce that they're going to grow in the land, right? You just got through telling them they're not going to go into the land, and then you say, when you go into the land, this is what you're going to do with the produce. So why are these together? To say, like, even though right now is not the time, but don't despair because I promise you'll get there, right? So there's an immediate promise of reaching.
An assurance.
There's an assurance of reaching the promised land, even at a time when it's not for now. And so we kind of said that last time. Magen will be preserved until we reach that time, but we will reach that time. It's the promise that the redemption will come. So maybe what you want to say is Magen Avraham, during this process of Magen, even though we're not achieving those promises now, but we shouldn't have to pass through this period of preservation in harshness, but rather in kindness. It should be a benevolent. I'm just mirroring to you what I'm hearing from you. I didn't think of this before the class, but I'm just elaborating on what I think you're saying.
With compassion or kindness.
With kindness,
redemption.
yeah. And if you think about it, and I'm speaking extemporaneously. If you think about it, isn't that sort of what we are experiencing now? We live in the United States of America. We're very blessed. We live in a country, there's never been a country so benevolent to the Jewish people. The Jews occupy the highest roles in American society. We live prosperous lives. free lives, freedom of religion. It's really, and it becomes a little bit of a problem because you get the complacent Jews. What do I need the redemption for anyway? I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good the way it is. I don't want to say who, because I'm being recorded. And even if I wasn't being recorded, I wouldn't say it. But there are people that I know who are like, I'm not really interested in Mashiach coming. Like that's not as attractive an idea to me as the way things are now. I don't really want things to change. I like it the way they are. I don't want to live in Israel. I don't want to have obligations and animal sacrifices and all that stuff. It's not appealing to me. So people who really so there's an upside and a downside. I'm just saying, based on what you're saying, Magen Avraham. Okay, we'll pass through this time, but it should be with kindness. It should. We do want it to be with kindness, but at the same time, it also leads to a bit of complacency. There's a famous story. It's not so famous. I told it a bunch of times, so it ought to be famous by now. The story is that at a Pesach Seder, when this family got to L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, so they started singing L'Shana Haba, L'Shana Haba, and they get up and they're dancing against the whole family and all the guests, this big crowd, a couple dozen people, they're running around the table dancing L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim, and they get so into it, they're so happy, they're so enthralled, they're so excited. Meanwhile, the husband notices that his wife is kind of sitting sulking in the corner, and she's looking a little upset. And he goes over to her and he says, "What's the matter?" And she says, "You're so excited about L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim." And I just think about how we just paid off the mortgage. I like living in this house. I like our community. And I'm not ready to go to Yerushalayim. I don't really feel the way about L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim that you feel. I'm not excited like you are. I like the way we're living now, and I would like it to remain. And he turns to his wife and he says, "Honey, it's just a song." It's a hard ending to the story. It's just a song. And isn't it so, though? I'm sorry to say, we sing the song, but for how many of us is it more than just a song? It's a hard reality. But even the Gemara says, I don't remember where, I'll look it up after. The Gemara says one of the Amoraim, one of the sages of the Talmud, I think it was Ula, he says, let Mashiach come, but let me not be there for it, right? That he understood that the travails that the Jewish people would endure prior to the redemption would be so intense that, of course, he hoped the Mashiach should come. He said, but he himself didn't want to endure, what would come before. He was kind of like, I'll take it the way it is now, Of course, I want Mashiach to come, L'Shana Haba b'Yerushalayim, but I don't need to be there for it. Right? So I heard an interesting explanation of that, because that's baffling, such a holy sage.
Not be there for it?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, are you going to arise after it's all over and it's Gan Eden, and all of a sudden you're going to plop into Gan Eden? Or, how do you spiritually get there then?
So we'll talk a little bit about it tonight. But the interesting question on this Gemara is, how could such a holy person like Ula say, let her come and let me not be there? So I read in a sefer called the Ahavas Chaim. He says the following parable. He says there was once a rich man, and he made a wedding for his son. And he made a huge affair, and he invited all the people in the town to come. Everyone was invited. And they're setting up this big outdoor tent where they're going to make the make the event. And they're setting up the tables and everything. And some people show up too early. They come a few hours too early. So they come in the middle of the day and the thing's in the evening. And it's in the middle of the winter. So they're setting up this tent. They're going to put heaters inside and, they're going to warm it up. But they get there and it's still really cold in the tent. It's freezing. So some poor people show up and some rich people show up. And the rich guys start talking to each other. They're like, it's not for a few hours. Let's go home and take a nap. And when it's time, we'll come back, right? So then the two poor people hear these rich people talking, and they say, oh, that's a good idea. One of them says, let's go home, let's go take a nap. And then when the party starts later, we'll come back. And the other fellow says to him, don't be a fool. These rich guys, the party's not going to start without them. So until they show up, the host is for sure going to send somebody to go wake them and bring them to the party. Says, you and I, we're not important. The party's going to start without us. If we go to sleep now, we might not wake up in time for the party. We're going to miss it. Better to stand here in the cold and freeze ourselves a little bit and be uncomfortable so we can enjoy the party when it comes. So the Havas Chaim says that is the parable for the end of days, so to speak. A tzaddik like Ula, he could say, I know that the Jewish people is going to pass through some difficult trials before that comes. And I don't want to experience that. So I'm okay to leave this world because I know they're going to wake me up. Like you said, I will be resurrected for the party at the end. But I don't want to be here for the suffering part. Says the Havas Chaim, but normal people, like me, normal people, don't have such a guarantee. And so we do need to daven, as we're going to see. We do need to daven for the redemption to come as soon as possible, even if it is in our time, because better to suffer in the cold and be at the party afterwards than to go to sleep and perhaps not be woken up for the party. So for people like us, we do want it to come. But anyway, that's just on a note of we do want it to come. We want to pass through the process with kindness. So that's true. I like that. It's good. It's good. What you're saying is good. It's so good that I don't need to say anymore. Even though I prepared a different answer. I don't know. I think that's good. What do you think? Magen Avraham. Preserve us with kindness.
I said that Avraham is known for his kindness, so that's why his name is mentioned at the end. I don't know, but I'm sure the rabbi has an interesting idea.
I'll share one short idea. The Magen, I have a little bit of a longer idea, but I don't want to drag it out because I think what you said was so thoughtful. So let's keep it. But Avraham, Rav Schwab says, because Avraham, there's two aspects to Avraham. Number one, Avraham was like the first one to make this connection with Hashem. When we talk about the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and their relationship with Hashem, well, to a certain degree, Yitzchak was raised by Avraham and inherited that relationship. And Yaakov inherited a relationship. Each one forged their own relationship. Yitzchak's relationship was different than Avraham, and Yaakov's was different than Yitzchak and Avraham. However, Avraham was the first one to forge that relationship. So on the one hand, he sort of gets the credit for the whole first bracha. The initial connection with Hashem goes to him. But something even more beautiful that he says is that Avraham, as the first one to make the connection with Hashem, stands as the inspiration for each of us to make our own unique connections. Because not only, first of all, those of us who are privileged to be born Jews may have inherited a relationship with Hashem from our parents, if they had a relationship with Hashem, from our teachers. Some of us who were born Jewish may not have had that privilege of relationship with Hashem early on because we may have come from a background where Hashem was not part of our milieu. And we did forge it on our own. We, in a similar way, were pioneers like Abraham, or a person who joins the Jewish nation from being born a non-Jew, is also a pioneer like Abraham in that way. And that's why a convert is given the name Ben Avraham, son of Abraham, for two reasons. Number one is to say, yes, you're part of the Jewish people. Just like every Jew is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so are you. But he's a descendant, spiritually speaking. His soul is connected, but also it means he's a Ben Avraham. He's walking in the footsteps of Avraham. Just like Avraham forged his own connection with Hashem in a world where that connection didn't exist for others. A person who converts to Judaism does the same thing. A person who's a baal teshuvah does the same thing. And even a person who, so to speak, FFB, as they call them, from birth, really ought to sort of re-examine his connection with Hashem and build it anew. Everyone should be an Avraham. So that unique connection with Hashem that we're describing in the first bracha, it has a special resonance with the personality of Avraham, and everybody should connect with that and say, I also need to be an Avraham. I also need to find Hashem. Wherever I'm coming from, whether I'm coming from a religious Jewish background, a non-religious Jewish background, or a non-Jewish background, I need to be like Avraham. I need to find Hashem for myself and connect to Him for myself. So that's why there's a special emphasis on Avraham. Every single person should make their own connection to Hashem. Okay, good?
Good.
Okay, Mazel Tov. We finished the first bracha. Can someone tell me the time? Because I can't see it on my phone while it's on camera. While it's recording.
My phone's over there.
I want to be mindful of the time. I'll keep going. You tell me.
8:16.
8:16?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. Now, the next bracha, which is the last line on page 98, the second bracha of Shemoneh Esreh, has a title. The first one, we said the title is Avos, the blessing of the fathers. The second bracha has a little title just above the last line. There's a little word there. What does it say? It says Givuros. Do you see that? It's on 98. You're on the right page.
Oh, yeah.
Just before the last line, in the middle line, Givurot. What does Givurot mean?
I think of it as strength.
Yeah, well, Givura is strength. So Givurot, literally there are strengths. This bracha is about Hashem's strengths. And we'll see that we saw before in the previous bracha that Gibor is mentioned in the previous bracha. Gadol, Gibor, Nora. We said in the first bracha, Gadol, great. We related to the attribute of kindness, something that has, so to speak, no bounds. Gibor, might. We related to the attribute of harshness, strictness, judgment. Someone said exactitude, restriction. And Nora, we related to the attribute of Yaakov. Each one was Avraham, kindness, and Yitzchak was strictness. And Nora, we said, was Yaakov. This awe was the blending of the two together. So now we're entering into the second bracha, the bracha of Givuros, of strength, might. So let's see what it says. Ata Gibor Le'olam Hashem. You are mighty forever, Hashem. Now, pause. The first bracha started with Baruch Ata Hashem.
Yeah, but it's a different spelling.
Oh, very good. Very good. Karen, you noticed that here the name Adonai is not spelled the way we usually spell it, which is with a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, meaning we pronounce it not the way it's spelled. We usually spell it like that, referring to God's infinity. Haya, Hove, Yihye, was, is, will be, the transcendent name that it transcends the creation. We usually focus on that name and we pronounce it the way we're spelling it here. Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, which mean from the word Adon, meaning Lord. My Lord is what this name means. And here we spelled it the way we pronounce it. So let's talk about that in a minute. I want to just address a little bit of halacha before we continue. The first bracha begins with Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Velokei Avosenu. Now what we said is, back then, that every bracha, in order to be valid, has to begin with the words Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. Anomalously, the first bracha we explained, the term Elokei Avosenu, God of our fathers, replaces the term Melech HaOlam in that bracha. It stands in its place. Fine. In other words, we made peace with it. We said, why isn't it there? And then we explained why. Now we're getting to the second bracha, and it doesn't start with Baruch at all. So for all the big deal that Rabbi Mallet made about a bracha needing to start with Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, and this one doesn't even start with Baruch, it starts with Atah. Why? This is not deep. What I'm about to tell you is not deep. I'm sure it's very deep, but I don't mean to go deep here. I just want to touch a piece of halacha that's important. There's a concept in halacha called bracha hasmucha lechaverta. That literally means a bracha which is adjacent to its fellow. A bracha that comes right after another. When you have a bracha that comes right after another bracha, that second bracha no longer has to begin with Baruch Atah Hashem because it's attached to the first one. And since the first one started with Baruch Atah Hashem, the second one is riding on that. It's a continuation. Even though I have at the end of the previous bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Hagein Avraham, and that's the closing of that bracha. Even when you close the bracha, if one immediately begins afterwards, you don't need to start all over again with Baruch Atah Hashem. You could just sort of begin with your thought, whatever the content of the bracha is, and it'll end again. Each bracha from this point forward will end with a short phrase of Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, and then a phrase encapsulating the idea of the bracha overall. So,
what is it again? Bracha
hasmucha lechaverta. The blessing which is attached to its fellow. Okay, so that's just a matter of halacha why we are not starting again with Baruch. I just want to address that. And none of the brachas of Shemoneh Esreh till the end will start with Baruch. Because we already did it. Okay? This one starts with Atah. Just goes straight to you. Now that's to me, that's very powerful. We start the bracha with you. We are maintaining the emphasis that we are in a conversation with Hashem. And we're speaking to Him very directly, very close. Well, again, we explained, and I think it was the first class, before we ever started recording, that the reason we whisper in Shemoneh Esreh is because we are replicating the way one speaks when one is very close to someone who they are in a very close relationship with, and they can get very, very close and speak in a whisper that just the other person can hear because it's very, very private. And only someone that you have a relationship could you get so close to that you could speak so softly that they can hear you. So that's where we are meant to feel when we say Shemoneh Esreh. We are very, very close with Hashem at that moment. So here again, Atah. And you'll see the next bracha, the third bracha, which is on page 102, begins with Atah again. And you'll see the bracha on page 102 in the third line, the second paragraph, again begins with Atah. For the next three brachas, we're going to start every single one with Atah, with you. After that, we don't. The reason being this. These first three brachas, we may have mentioned this before, are in a category of bracha called Shevach. Shevach means praise. We are praising Hashem, so we're speaking directly to Him and we're sort of describing His attributes. if you will, and his actions. So we're addressing Hashem with Atah. When we get to the fourth bracha, which is on page 102, the second paragraph, over it is a little word that says Bina, which means understanding. And that's the bracha where we ask Hashem for wisdom and understanding. It's the first bracha of a section called Bakasha. Bakasha means request. The real requests begin with the fourth bracha, which is the second paragraph on page 102. But there's a transition that happens within that first bracha. There's a transition from praise to request. It begins with a praise, which we'll get to when we get to it. That fourth blessing, which is the first of the requests, actually begins with a praise and then transitions into a request. The first sentence is a praise, the second sentence is a request, and from then on we're just making requests. So instead of saying, you are, which we've been doing until now, from that point forward, we're just saying, do, act. This is what I'm asking of you. Chanenu, give us wisdom. Hashivenu, return us to you. Salach lanu, forgive us. We're just going to go straight into the request from that point forward. But here in this section that we're in now, everything begins with Atah. Everything is a direct address to Hashem where we are praising Him. Okay. So far, so good?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why it's like that. That it's a combo.
Why the fourth one is a combo?
Yeah, a versus
just request. Just make a request.
The next one, a request. Yeah.
Good question. Let's save it.
It takes away the praise a little bit when you have a request tagged right on the.
Okay, but it's central. The main purpose of that fourth blessing is a request. The question is, what's the praise doing there? There's three blessings of praise. Then there's at the end 3 of thanksgiving, and in the middle there are, my math isn't great, there's 13 of request, which equals a total of 19. So you see there are 19 blessings in the Shemoneh Esreh, which means 18. 19 blessings in the 18 blessings, which is a topic for when we get to the one that was added. It used to be 18. Now it's 19. We'll talk about that later. Okay, in a few months from now. Okay. So Ata Gibor. First thing we're saying is, Hashem, you are mighty. Ata Gibor le'olam, and then Hashem. You rightly pointed out that we do not have the Yud name. Why is the Yud name not here? The Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. Why is that name not here? So if you think deeply, you'll remember that is the name of transcendence. That is the name that represents a connection to an infinity that's beyond our world. But when we're talking about Gevura, Gibor, might, which we're transitioning from the attribute of kindness to the attribute of what's called strict justice, or strictness, or judgment, or things along those lines, we're moving into the finite now. So Ata Gibor, might is finite, as it says in Pirkei Avos. In Pirkei Avos, Ethics of the Fathers, it says, Ezehu Gibor, who is the mighty one? Hakovesh es Yitzro, the one who conquers his inclination, meaning the one who restrains himself, the one who is able to impose restriction on himself. So boundaries, restrictions, limitations is an expression of might. So you, Hashem, are Gibor, you are mighty, and so we use the name of Hashem without referencing that spelling which calls for the infinite. Here we're talking about Hashem's action within the finite created world. And we say Hashem is mighty for le'olam. Le'olam. So le'olam means forever. And if I asked you, why do we say to Hashem, you're mighty forever? What is the word forever doing there? What do I need that word there for? I kind of understand why you're mighty, because we're talking now about that attribute.
It's kind of a finite spelling of God, but it's an infinite description, the layout forever.
Okay, so what you're saying is similar to what Rav Schwab says. Rav Schwab says that forever means even transcending the world. Meaning, here's what the concept that I think is really encapsulated in this bracha throughout, is that the limitations of this world are imposed by Hashem, but they are not imposed upon Hashem. Hashem sets the limits, but he himself is not limited. The limits are imposed by him, but they're not imposed on him. So you're mighty forever, says Rav Schwab, essentially, within this world and its limitations and beyond it. Your might isn't limited by the world that you have created with limitations through this attribute. But that is not who you are or what you are. Okay. Mechaye mesim ata. So for example, prime example, what we go to immediately, and it's so strange, right? Is to say, Mechaye mesim ata. You, Mechaye, you give life to mesim, the dead. Mechaye mesim ata. You give life to the dead. Meaning, what we say in English, you resurrect the dead. You bring the dead to life. Meaning death would seem to be the most ultimate limitation that there is. It's the most ultimate imposition that Hashem has put on existence. And even that imposition does not limit you, because you, Hashem, have promised that even that will be reversed, that even death will be overcome. What we're going to see in this bracha is we're going to reference all these limiting factors and how, yes, Hashem has created a nature to the world with limitations, but through a connection with Hashem, we are all capable of rising beyond those limitations. Our own limitations, the limitations of the world itself, and it opens, in no small fanfare with death itself, you overcome. Mechaye mesim ata. These two words together are opposites. Mechaye, life, mesim, death. Mechaye mesim ata. You are one who can overcome even death with life. And then these words fit perfectly. Rav lehoshia. You are Rav, which means great or abundant. Lehoshia, to save. English translation, abundantly able to save. Rav lehoshia, saving abundantly. So remember from just the end of the last bracha, when we said Melech, Ozer, Umoshia, Umagen, that Hashem is helping. When we can put in effort, Hashem helps us. That's Ozer. Umoshia, saving is, we said, when I have no ability to do anything, Hashem will act to save me. So what is the most debilitating state any person could be in? Death itself. Rav lehoshia. Even in that situation, there's an abundant saving. There's a saving that goes beyond the normal sense of saving, because usually you save something when there's something to save. And death will say, well, it's all over. There's nothing more to be done. But no, not in Hashem's world. Even death can be overcome by Hashem, and therefore he is Rav lehoshia. He saves even abundantly, even supernaturally, you might say. Even beyond natural.
So that Rav could mean supernaturally?
Yeah, because Rav means abundantly. So, in other words, what's it doing over there? Lehoshia, you might say, is to save through means that, are more understandable. But Rav is even beyond what we would imagine.
May I back up?
Please.
Because I didn't write clearly the difference. I know that the Hashem Adoshem word at the top of the bracha is for infinite.
Yes.
But the Gevura Adonai word is the strength, is the finite. How do you say it again? Or maybe that's it.
How do I say it again? Okay, well, you're making a good point, because what I did say is, the Yud name is beyond this world, is infinity. And when we normally we look at that name, but we say a different name. We say Adonai, and we mean the Yud name, but Adonai means Lord. Here we're leaving the infinity out, and we're using it just as Lord. So what I said is essentially within the world. But I didn't really define what Adon is. I didn't go into it. But Rav Schwab says that Adon, master, over here is, again, it's emphasizing the relationship between us and Hashem. Because a master means someone who, like you think of like a master of a household. And he may have servants in his household, but he has a direct relationship with his employees, with his servants, with the people underneath him. He's the Adon, he's their master. He's dealing with them directly. So when we think of, I'm going into a little more detail because you asked why it's like this. When we think about Gevura, we think about the more restricted revelation of Hashem in nature. We tend to think of almost a godless world, because the limitations of nature, they seem to just run on their own. In fact, materialists, we're going to talk about this if we have any time, we'll talk more about it. Materialists insist that all there is to the world is what we can see and what we can detect with our scientific instruments and implements, and there really is nothing more. And it's just so to speak, the laws of physics, which we're still trying to figure out. The laws of physics that dictate everything that happens. Everything. Physics, chemistry, everything's predetermined, right? There's no free will. There's nothing higher. There's nothing outside. There's no spirit. There's no soul. There's no God. So that the naturalistic, limited world that is revealed to us also serves to conceal Hashem. So the emphasis here of Hashem as Adon is that even within this limited world, we still have a relationship with Hashem. He's still our Adon. Another way of putting it is, so when nature takes its course and things don't go our way, so then we think, where's God? He's not with me right now, because look at these things that are happening to me, right? And it's very hard, it's a very great test to see through one's circumstances a controlling hand of Hashem, and a benevolent one that says, I'm doing this for your benefit. So the Adon, says Rav Schwab, is that even this naturalistic limited world that we see, it's still the master. It's still the master. It's still the Adon. He is relating to us through these vehicles. That's what we're meant to see, even in this limited world. So we're not hearkening to the Yud. But even in this limited world, there's Adon, there's a master. And he has a relationship with us. We're his servant. And what's being done, as difficult as it might feel to experience it, is being done for our benefit. So there is an Adon, there is a relationship, even if the naturalistic world obscures that. Okay, time check.
8:38.
8:38. Okay, so Mincha's in 7 minutes. Let's see if we could do the next line. Probably not, but we'll see what we can do. We'll do it fast. In the winter, we add at the top of page 100, we add these words, Mashiv haruach umorid hageshem. We're saying of Hashem that you Mashiv haruach, you cause the wind to blow, umorid hageshem, and you bring down the rain. We say that in the winter during the season where we more or less expect the rains to come. In the non-rainy seasons, some have a custom to say the words morid hatal, you bring down the dew. Why is this inserted into this blessing? Now, from what I said now, it might be pretty obvious. I give you a good setup to answer this question. Without the setup I gave you, the question is a harder question. But what would you say? We're talking about the restricted, the attribute of more strict revelation on Hashem's part. When we talk about the second bracha of Gibor, Hashem's power within the world and not being limited by it himself, even though we're somewhat limited by it.
I mean, he's working through, as you were mentioning, working through nature. I mean, I've always associated that line with the next one, You're talking about, you're talking about sustaining people, and this is part of sustaining.
100%. What you're saying is so wise. Let's look at the next words. Mechalkel chayim b'chesed. You sustain the living with kindness. That's through the rain, right? Look at the words after that. Mechayim meisim b'rachamim rabim. You give life to the dead with great mercy. Now the question is, how does that relate? That seems to, okay, how does that, it relates. How does it relate? Okay, let's see if I can say two quick ideas and we'll pause. So yes, we said nature. Nature is a very delicate balance. Nature is a very delicate balance. It's almost, I want to say, coming off the materialists. The materialists who say that what we see in the world, the physical world, is all there is, right? And we need not look any further for causation of anything, right? Which is really scientifically a very big problem because nobody really knows where it all came from. There's really no answer for that without hearkening to a prior cause of some sort, which the materialists refuse to do. But even within nature, we find there's such a refinement. And we talk about rain, it's the perfect encapsulation of that. It's a very great revelation of Hashem. As they say, they're looking everywhere right now in the galaxy for planets with water. The solar system, beyond the solar system, can we find water? Why are they so interested in water? Because where there's water, there's life, right? And we find that by the way, where there's water, there's also death. Because water is a solvent. Water dissolves things. It's a very big problem for the preservation of fossils. Water dissolves everything. So water is destructive. It's also creative. But only in the right balance. So it's sort of in the same vein of this bracha, which talks about the sort of the ultimate destruction and paradoxically the creation, death and life out of death. Water could be death and water could be life, but only when it's in the perfect balance.
Same with the body, the water in the body, the fluids in the body. It is a perfect balance to maintain life.
Right.
If it's out of balance, you get sick and you can die.
Right. So I'm very tempted to tell a story. There's a story in the Gemara in Tainus when there was a famine. They went to a tzaddik, a righteous fellow whose name was Choni HaMa'agel. Literally, that means Choni, the circle maker. And he was called the circle maker because of this story, not before the story. But they asked him to pray for rain, and he sort of draws a circle in the ground, and he stands in the circle, or he sits in the circle, and he says, God, I'm not moving from this circle till you make it rain. And the Gemara says that it started drizzling, kind of like step out of the circle, but I'm not bringing it. It was a drizzle. It wasn't useful for nourishing the land, but God was answering him like, I heard you, but I'm not giving you rain, so just step out of the circle. I absolved you of that obligation that you obligated yourself. And he says, God, that's not what I meant, right? So then suddenly the rain started pouring in a downpour that's going to flood the whole land and kill everybody. So he says, God, that's not what I meant. And then the rains balance out into just the right balance. And Shimon ben Shetach, who was one of the very prominent rabbis at the time, sends a letter to Choni HaMa'agel, and he says, if you were any other man, I would excommunicate you for the way that you spoke to God, so brazenly. But because I know how great you are, I'm giving you a pass. Like, only you could do that, right? But the idea is like, too little is no good and too much is no good. And we find that with all the natural constants, with even the laws of physics themselves, the way they are set up, that it's just this much and not more. The distance of the earth to the sun, the moon to the earth, the exact shape of the moon, and the gravitation of the moon, and how it pulls all the little meteors out of the cosmos, and they hit the moon. It's packed with craters so they don't hit the earth, and the tides and the winds, and every aspect of nature is in a perfect harmony. So we could be here pondering the universe and exploring it with our minds. So to say, for the same materialists who are looking at all this and saying that's all there is, are ignoring the obvious fact that these have been put into a perfect balance that is screaming, the identity of the Creator, right? So the rain. Now I'll say one more thing and we'll pause. In Hebrew, Geshem doesn't mean rain. Geshem also means material. What do I mean? In Hebrew, lahagshim, the verb lahagshim means to make something real, right? For something to materialize is lahagshim, right? Or lahit gashem. That word rain is the word which calls into being the idea of material itself. And in fact, there's another word for rain, which is, another Hebrew word for rain? It's what we say in the later bracha when we're actually requesting it, as we say, V'tein tal, give dew, matar, and matar. Matar is another word for rain. You might notice that the word matar is very similar to the word matter. Matter and material. Because rain is what's representative of that which sort of gives existence. The word itself means material. It means matter. So so on the one hand, calling into existence matter in the terminology of rain, I see over here, is an acknowledgement of the way Hashem has put into the material world this perfect balance, where you have forces that could be very destructive if they're in the wrong balance, too little or too much, and they're just perfectly harmonized for creation. So it's like Hashem's thumbprint on the universe, might want to say. The last thing I want to say, was really the last thing, is that there is a relationship between rain and the resurrection, which is in, I believe it's the book of Isaiah in Yeshayahu. I put it in my notes, but I don't have them in front of me, where basically Yeshayahu says that, I'll have to look up the citation exactly, but he basically says like the dew will fall upon those who lie in the earth. The dew comes down to the earth and they'll arise. The rising of the dead is described in Yeshayahu and Isaiah as coming about through this heavenly dew coming down and picking them up. And it's called tal oros, a dew of light. And the commentators explain that it's a metaphor for Torah, and that the people who were had an attachment to Torah and fulfilled the Torah, namely the tzaddikim, the righteous, those are the ones who will be risen in the resurrection, which is promised for the righteous, and those who did not have that connection to Torah shall not be risen. So when we talk about the resurrection, which is features heavily in this bracha, it's related to rain because that's the prophetic language of how the tal, the dew, will fall upon the earth and resurrect these dead people. But it's because that's also this language of the dew is also a metaphor for the Torah, and that our connection to the Torah will be sort of our ticket to rise at the time of the resurrection.
And I wonder if the wind blow is also the breath of life in the resurrected individuals and the neshama.
Very good. See, I didn't even think that deeply about the wind. Here I am talking about rain, and there's ruach, and the word ruach, which means wind, also means spirit, right?
Right.
And those, that is the terminology that's used in describing the creation of life. It's with a breath, it's with a wind. If I'm not mistaken, I think when it says that Hashem made man into a nefesh, he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and it says man became lenefesh chaya, a living spirit. There, Targum Onkelos, the Aramaic translation of Onkelos, says for a living spirit, nefesh chaya, he translates it as ruach memalala, which means a speaking spirit, a speaking ruach. So ruach is terminology that is used in reference to life, certainly. So it is a reference to the resurrection as well. But not just that, that's on the sort of the supernatural end, but even on the natural end, the rain as the water, that life-giving resource that's perfectly harmonized and balanced by Hashem in the natural world and reveals Hashem within nature.